Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Politecnico di Milano. It's a real pleasure to see many familiar faces here, and also finally to meet the many of you that I have seen only from distance, or of which I know the work, the effort, the one I have encountered online through your work. There is something deeply encouraging in knowing that so many people have gathered here because they care about change, and more precisely because they are committed to changing the conditions of change. Anticipation is often discussed through concept, methods, scenarios, and systems. But before all of this, there are people. There are relationships. There are communities of practice, research, care, imagination, and responsibility. And I believe that these relationships are what make transformation possible. For this reason, I would like to begin our work with gratitude. First of all, I wanted to thank Victoria Rodriguez-Schoen, not only as our program manager, but definitely as a co-chair of this conference. Without her intelligence, dedication, patience, and extraordinary capacity to hold together every detail, none of what will happen in these 3 days would have ever been possible. I also wanted to thank Rebecca Squeri, I don't see her, there she is, for communication and social media management, Riccardo Torta for the visual identity and graphic visualization that you see in all the work outside, and the communication team of the department that really supported us during this adventure, in particular Eleonora and Giada, for their precious support. I would also like to acknowledge the members of the board, my local committees composed by design department colleagues, sorry, here they are, composed by design department colleagues, the steering committee, the scientific committee, and all the session chairs. May I ask you, if you are in the room, especially in the one seated here in the front row, please stand and look at the public because we want to clap at you. Thank you. This conference is also the result of your work. The call for Anticipation 2026 received more than 400 submissions. Less than half were selected. Over these 3 days, we will welcome participants from more than 35 countries, scholars, researchers, designers, practitioners, policymakers, and representatives of NGO and civic organization. This diversity matters. It tells us that anticipation is not a closed field, not a single disciplinary conversation. It is a growing and plural space of inquiry where different forms of knowledge, experience, and practice come together to ask how futures are imagined and made possible. So welcome. Thank you for being here. The journey you have made, thank you for the many of you who had a long travel. And we can start the conversation. I wanted to invite our Vice Rector, Isabella Nova, for an official welcome from Politecnico di Milano.
Thank you, Manuela, and good morning, everyone. It's both a pleasure and an honor for me to welcome you to Politecnico di Milano on behalf of our rector for the opening of the 6th International Conference on Anticipation. Founded in 1863, Politecnico di Milano is one of Europe's leading scientific and technology universities, internationally recognized for excellence in engineering, architecture, and design. Our mission has always been clear: through research, education, innovation, and international cooperation to address the major challenges facing contemporary societies. We gather here today at a defining moment. Uncertainty is no longer an exception. It has become the condition of our time. Ecological disruption, technological acceleration, geopolitical instability, and profound social transformation are not distant possibilities on the horizon. They are present realities, reshaping the assumptions that have long guided planning, decision-making, and innovation. This is why the question at the heart of this conference matters so deeply. How do we engage with the unknown, not by avoiding it, but by thinking through it? How do we navigate paradox and complexity without retreating into false certainties? How do we cultivate hope, not as wishful thinking, but as a collective capacity for informed and responsible action? These are not only academic questions. They are the very questions that institutions, governments, organizations, and communities around the world are confronting today. University cannot remain on the sideline. Our role is not only to generate knowledge, but also to help society interpret change, engage uncertainty, and imagine responsible pathway toward the future. At Politecnico di Milano, this is a strategic commitment. We believe that today's challenges, from the climate transition to digital transformation, from social inclusion to sustainable development, demand deep interdisciplinary collaboration. This commitment has recently been recognized internationally. Politecnico di Milano now ranks 15th in the world, 3rd in Europe, and 1st in Italy in the Times Education Higher Interdisciplinary Science Ranking. Strategic foresight is another capability that has become essential from universities, for public institutions, and for every organization that takes the future seriously. Not as a tool for prediction, but as a discipline for exploring alternatives, informing decision, and building resilience precisely when the future refuses to be certain. There is one further dimension that I would like to highlight: international collaboration, not simply as partnership, but as science diplomacy. The deliberate creation of spaces where dialogue, collaboration, and mutual learning can flourish across disciplines, cultures, and national borders. The community gathered here today is a powerful expression of this commitment. Over the coming days, researchers, designers, educators, artists, practitioners, policymakers, and representatives of international institutions will engage in a shared conversation on how futures are imagined, negotiated, and shaped. We are especially pleased to welcome the growing network of UNESCO chairs, whose work continues to advance future literacy, sustainability, anticipation, social transformation across the globe. Their closing roundtable will offer an important opportunity to reflect on the future of this community and its shared agenda. I would also like to acknowledge the Department of Design for hosting this conference, for its sustained contribution to design as a strategic capability, a discipline that engages with complexity rather than simplifying it, and imagines alternative future rather than merely optimizing the present. My special thanks also to Manuela, the chair of the 2026 conference, for her dedication and commitment in making this event possible. I wish you all I wish you all an inspiring conference, stimulating discussion, and many new collaboration that will extend well beyond these days together. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella. I would like now to invite Paola Bertola, Director of our department, to give her welcome, and I want to thank her and the department for all the facilities and the availabilities of the resources that we have to organize the conference.
Thank you, Manuela. I'm truly delighted to welcome you all at Politecnico di Milano and at our Department of Design for the opening of the 2026 Anticipation Conference. For us, it is an important milestone to having been able to bring this conference at Politecnico di Milano, which also is a sign of a long path that Politecnico di Milano has went through to develop epistemologies, approaches, methodologies, and practices into this context of research. It is an important milestone also because design is now fully welcomed within this community of anticipation of this specific field of research. And this is particularly important because this research community is one of the most open and diverse where design acts and is now looking at and doing research. And collaborative, open research community that are looking into very different domain of knowledge are the ones that actually we need at this very moment to face the contemporary challenges and also to look at our future. I recently read the outline of the conference and some of the contribution to this conference. And actually the topic that was chosen for this edition was particularly refreshing to me. Staying with the unknown, paradox, uncertainty, and the praxis of hope. The praxis of hope in particular touched me. I recently read the essay from the philosopher Byung-Chul Han, The Spirit of Hope. It opposes hope to optimism. While optimism is in some way a blind positivity expecting the future to be better, hope opens horizons of possibilities. It's truly different from optimism because it allows actions, and within the design community we are pretty much engaged with action, imagination, and community that are able to face anxiety and fears, which are dimensions that actually very much characterize our contemporary reality and makes the future somehow actionable, explorable. So hope is a truly important dimension right now. In This Must Be the Place, the movie by Paolo Sorrentino, Raquel, the protagonist, speaking about her son Tommy that fears water, introduces the topic of fears and says, "Fear saves us every time." And Cheyenne Champagne responds her by shifting the meaning of fears and saying, "But you have to choose a moment in your life to not be afraid, to not have fear." And I really think that we are living in such a moment, and hope is really a dimension that can give us, I think, the energy and the possibility to look into the future in a different way. And also having so many different intelligences and knowledge domains and practices and capacities in this room, but in general in this community, I think that this conference is particularly relevant at this very moment. So I really wish you to have great moments enriching during this conference and to bring out some ideas to build on this hope. Thank you very much.
I want to leave the floor to Anna Meroni. She is the Vice Dean of the School of Design. I think it was important also to have her contribution because introducing design future literacy, anticipatory literacy inside the educational field, it's also something that for us matters.
Hello. You may believe that Politecnico is woman. Oh, yeah. It is, maybe, no? So it's also a pleasure welcoming you. And I'm speaking on behalf of the School of Design. As you probably know, the School of Design is a quite large public institution. It's certainly the biggest in Europe and probably one of the biggest in the world. Speaking in terms of numbers of students and teachers, today we have around 4,700 students and more than 500 teachers. So big numbers. Big numbers imply big responsibilities. And our responsibilities is first toward the students, of course, because students, of course, need to fulfill their ambitions and find their place in the planet, in the present and in the future, and find meaning in what they do and create meaning for the lives of the others. At the same time, we feel the responsibility also to continuously redesign our educational system, not only what we teach, but also how we teach to a generation that, as you clearly know, is fast changing. And so, to be responsive to all these changes is the biggest responsibility that we feel now as not only teachers, but also leading this school. So I think that today the art of anticipation is harder than ever, but you are the expert, you will tell us this probably. But as designers, and also as Paola mentioned it, we believe that future is something that we contribute creating and making. And being a designer, of course, means being optimist. I still believe that, but of course, holding hope for the future, despite all the circumstances. Just a couple of weeks ago, we hosted here the Participatory Design Conference, and I see people that participated also in that conference. I hope that in the meantime you had at least vacations in Italy. And at the conference, the Participatory Design Conference was titled Peace, Dialogue and Coexistence. So, of course, the relevance of the topic is unquestionable today, and the conference was an opportunity to really put together and share perspectives and different thoughts on this. One thing we have learned is that in times of uncertainty, polarization, and increasing difficulty in living together, teaching future literacy means teaching how to navigate turbulence, deal with positions that might appear irreconcilable, negotiate, make decisions with incomplete knowledge, and accept risk. We also, of course, reflected on participation. Acknowledging different voices and positions is always complex, is time-consuming, is demanding, as is far from being optimal in a design process. Yet, it is perhaps the best way to grasp at least part of the complexity around us and to share the responsibility of decision-making for the future. So anticipation, we intended anticipation as a way to structure collective conversation about the future. And it is a collective exercise in imagination that brings together people with different experiences, perspective, agendas. So we believe anticipation is a collective exercise, and in today's world, it can hardly be otherwise. If we want peace and coexistence tomorrow, it's clear that we need to understand that they can only be built today, from today on. They can only emerge from a process of collective construction of the future. And also, we have learned that peace studies reminds us that war is a state, but peace is a process. It's something that we have to build day by day. So in this context, the theme of anticipation invites us to question also our role as institutions and educators. What future we are able to design through our institution and with our students? What kind of future literacy do we need to engage with for dealing with the complexity of today's world? I'm sure it will be, the next days will be rich of thoughts and experiences, and I'm sure that also education will be part of the reflection. So I wish you the best for the very next days, and I hope to have you soon for another conference, maybe not in a couple of weeks, but not even in a couple of years. Thank you.
I'm now asking Carrie Facer from Anticipation Conference Board to give you a welcome, and also she will kind of make the point of the different edition that we already have, also for the one of you who are new to the Anticipation Conference. Thank you, Carrie. Welcome.
There we go. So, good morning. It's lovely to see you all here today. So I'm going to give a brief history for the Anticipation Conference. So first up, though, hands up who's been to an Anticipation Conference before. Great, lovely to see those of you again. And is it the first time? Wonderful. Wow, welcome. Okay, well, good. So I'm giving a history to those who haven't heard this before. So I'm going to start with a story. So once upon a time in the 1990s, apartheid is ending in South Africa. Bill Clinton's leading the US. India is liberalizing. The UK has still got Margaret Thatcher. The Iron Curtain has just come down. The internet's just arriving. Jacques Delors is bestriding Europe and setting up future centers. And everybody is obsessed with Japan as a primary concern. The old industries are dying. Diversity is increasing. The hole in the ozone layer is still growing. And complexity is becoming more visible. And in this context, at that time, technological forecasting and development thinking is rife across Europe. There are futures techniques, predictions, modeling, forecasting and scenarios increasingly popular in corporations and governments. There are big bets being placed on certain technologies. Inevitable futures are being proposed. The end of history is being proclaimed, and the information society is being taken for granted. Meanwhile, a plucky band of critical futures scholars and practitioners, STS researchers, humanities researchers, design studies, critical management studies, educators, and some policymakers are asking questions about this way of thinking about the future. They are saying, what are the assumptions about change and reality that underpin these technological foresight claims? They're asking, on what basis can they claim to know and predict the future? Who's making these claims and who isn't involved? What about ethics and accountability? Why do people think these futures claims will work? And these questions are coming out of a different set of ideas about reality, a set of ideas that recognize complexity and emergence, the limits of human agency, the co-presence of other actors, the dangers of teleology, of predictions that have to be forced, sometimes violently, into reality, and the necessity of dignity and democratic decision-making. And out of these questions come a series of events. There comes from 2003 to 2013 something called the COST-A22 Working Group Zero network. The Working Group Zero was a mysterious little group of people who were concerned with the question of the methodology, the philosophy, and the ontology of futures thinking. And that then moved into something called FUME Europe, led by Roberto Poli. Now, there are people in this room who were there in COST-A22 network. Could they put their hands up? Yes, brilliant. So you know who you are. That's 3 of you. There was then a Bellagio Rockefeller conference, which launched the UNESCO Futures Literacy Network. I think there were some more people there. Who was there? Okay, a few of us. Brilliant. Oh, hello. And then out of that has come 10 years of anticipation conferences. So the first was just around the corner in Trento, led by Roberto Poli in 2015. Then in London, one that I led in 2017. One led by Andrew Morrison in Oslo in 2019. Cynthia Sellen led it. You will notice there was a gap in 2021. We all know what happened. So we shifted to 2022, led by Cynthia Sellen. And then Carlos Lopez Galvez led in Lancaster 2024. And we land here today with the conference that Manuela is leading. So that's one history of how we got here. That's sort of institutional stories. But there are many streams flowing into anticipation studies. And they are everything from digital media, games, narrative, speculative fiction. We all know there's work on sociology and anthropology of the future. There's a whole bunch of us from education, critical literacies, looking at educational futures. There is a big field in STS, critiques of technological foresight. Co-produced research, participatory methods has got an important role. Critical heritage studies, temporality studies, philosophy and theology, literature, discourse analysis, transition, sustainability, transformations, and many more. There are also historians, I've realized, looking at Carlos in the front row. So there may even be geographers. Have we got any geographers in? Okay, we're still keeping space out then. Right, fine. So the question is, well, what is anticipation studies? This is a bit of a debate. Is it a discipline or is it a field? We're just calling it anticipation studies for now and not worrying about that. But it is an evolving definition, but there is some common ground. And the common ground is that really we're thinking about anticipation as a process. So it's the study of the relationship between the images and ideas of the future and how these shape perceptions and actions in the present. It's that relationship. And we recognize that anticipation is something that all living creatures do. And there is also an ethical commitment to do this with care. Our assumption is that by studying anticipation, we can become critically reflexive at 2 key moments. We can become reflexive at the moment when futures are imagined, and we can become critically reflexive at the point at which futures are used to shape perception and action in the present. So this work is still needed today. How do we think about climate change when scenarios haven't achieved their political goals? How do we take care of the long term when the long term is becoming the terrain of the tech bros and the field of effective altruism? What does it mean to work with young people around futures when past generations' futures imaginings have brought ecological catastrophe? And still these old questions, how do we work with and think with futures in an age of complexity? So anticipation studies is all of us. It's all of us in this room. It is all these disciplines. It's all these approaches. It is a radically interdisciplinary field, and that's why this is such a fabulous conference. It's so rare to be with each other in this way. We are all needed. And in these conferences, we are a diverse, welcoming community. We're trying to do academia differently. We create space for experiment and play, for co-construction and creativity. We allow a very geeky interest in ontology and change in time. Geekiness is allowed. We also have an ethical commitment to justice and social transformation and an interest in methods and methodology. We value diverse positions. We are supportive. We are not claiming territory. We resist that academic tendency to individual competition. We are all in this together. If we are not working together, we're in trouble. So this conference is where we come together to help each other explore all these issues. So for now, I just want to invite you for 1 minute to turn to somebody you don't know and just introduce yourself. And I will give you 1 minute. Okay. Oh. Okay, everybody, let's turn back, see if we can stop. Okay, stop talking to each other now. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Can I introduce you to the very useful, I'm sure many of you know this, facilitation technique of when one person puts their hands up, everybody else puts their hands up and everybody goes gently quiet and nobody has a shout. Brilliant. So you've started meeting new people. A friend of mine, fabulous facilitator, Pernilla Glaser, always says that the first time people get together, they spend the first day being super anxious about what everybody else thinks about them. Let's see if we can let that go. Let's know that we've all got that there. Let's sort of, she calls it stroking the puppy. Let's just recognize there's a little puppy on our shoulder that's a bit anxious about who we are and who we're meeting. Just notice it, put it to one side. You are safe, you're amongst friends, we're in an interesting space, and we're going to have a great 3 days. So thanks to all of you for coming. Thank you, and huge thanks to Manuela and the team here for all the work needed to get us to this point.
So I just want to introduce you to the conference address and what we're going to do in these 3 days. Unknown. When we started this conference adventure, we didn't know where it would lead us. If the future does not belong to us, the vertigo of the unknown becomes something very different. It can be frightening, but it can also be exciting. How do we feel the unknown? Unknown and unknown unknowns. The unknown is not darkness, not simply absence or ignorance. It is the generative condition that compels thought and imagination to begin again. Our present is saturated with futures, from geopolitical anxieties and hot climatic urgency we are actually experiencing, from technological premises to algorithmic predictions. The future is constantly invoked, measured, modeled, optimized, feared, and desired. Yet, our capacity to imagine otherwise often appears increasingly fragile. Benanti, an Italian journalist, recently described one expression of this fragility as decolonization of judgment. The risk of that algorithmic system occupied the space of questioning and responsibility. The unknown is already embedded in the system we inhabit, in the technology we use before understanding their consequences, and in the social transformation we experience before we can even fully name them. Anticipation requires a philosophy that moves beyond interpretation, engaging in the generative practice of concept making, concepts that render future both thinkable and actionable. Recently, the design philosopher João Afonso Azaré has invited us to move even further. If futures are plural, then it is not enough to multiply images of the future. We must also question the categories through which futures become thinkable. Anticipating also entails questioning the frames of transformation, asking which concept we inherit, which limit our capacity to think otherwise, and which other philosophical standpoints, or I would say even cosmology, may help us reconfigure the present from elsewhere. Donna Haraway's invitation to stay with the trouble begins precisely from this refusal to escape the present. It refuses two symmetrical temptations: the fantasy that technology will save us and the despair that nothing can still be done. Staying with the trouble means being present in a damaged world without delegating its resolution to an abstract future. It means cultivating responsibility, the capacity to think and act within specific relations. As designers, we recognize that design, often described as a future-oriented discipline, cannot treat the futures as the territory to be planned in advance. It must acknowledge the unpredictability of what is still emerging, working at the liminal area between the known and the not yet known. Design must become a discipline of attention, able to give provisional forms. This is a plea for another kind of precision, an accuracy that allows hesitation, recognizes perplexities as integral to inquiry, and asks what remains unseen because we presume to know. The unknown is temporal. With the temporality in tension, the future will be approached as a field of competing temporalities already active in the present, where different futures coexist. Urgency and duration, memory and possibility, crisis and transformation shape different ways of inhabiting time, and you will be speaking about that. The unknown arises where these temporalities meet, in the tension between any immediate action and long-term responsibility, between the already damaged and the not yet determined. Paradox. Tension can be multiple. Competing values, temporalities, and responsibility often coexist freely, generating conflict. They produce paradoxes. Many of the future we discuss are constrained by tension that resist resolution between ecological urgency and short-term economic cycles, or between peace as freedom from conflict and peace as the construction of social, spatial, and economic and cultural conditions. Contemporary paradox asks us to remain with this tension, to inhabit it long enough for new questions to emerge. We need slowness. Over the past 2 days, the PhD school has worked on this terrain. Paradoxes have not been treated as rhetorical figures, but as devices for inquiry, instruments for deconstructing present assumption and opening radical narratives. They operate as provocations, inviting us to rethink real phenomena, interrupt habitual framings, and make visible the dichotomies that prevailing modes of reasoning tend to simplify. A paradox in this sense is a call to think differently, as Circa and Onen remind us. It does not give us a solution, it creates the condition for a different relation to the problem. It slows the movement from uncertainty to resolution, making desirable possibilities and symptom changes thinkable. How then can we work with tensions that resist resolution? With governance, justice, and the public, anticipation appears as an explicit political practice. Futures enter decision about infrastructure, policies, institutions. They are negotiated by processes whose consequences go beyond the present. Governance is also crossed by paradox. Participation may empower while becoming procedural. Data may reveal while obscuring. Security may be protected through forms of exclusion. To govern anticipatorily is to make visible the tension through which futures become public and actionable. At a planetary scale, this tension took form as a dedicated spontaneous threat emerged from the cold. Planetary ecologies of anticipation extend the question between human needs and time scale, asking what becomes possible when more than human actors and ecological systems are understood as actors in the process. Fabio Scarano's work on the Atlantic forest offers a powerful example of this shift, transforming degradation as the ground for a possible sustainable future, a biodiversity hotspot becoming, in his word, a hope spot. Here, paradox is inescapable. Ecological urgency demands rapid action, yet ecological time unfolds slowly. These tensions are difficult to inhabit because our anticipatory habits often push us toward the simplifications. Ivana Milojevich's work on future fallacies helps name the patterns of thought that make paradox disappear just when it should become most visible. Projecting the past linearly into the future and imagining one change while holding everything else still. Paradox then becomes a critical device of slowness. To hold paradox is to distinguish which tension we are willing to see and which we have normalized. Uncertainty. As Betty Marenko points out, uncertainty is the irrevocable, oceanic, and cosmic condition of existence. This sentence gives uncertainty a scale that isn't just technical, but existential. Uncertainty is not simply what remains where prediction fails. It is the condition within which knowledge and action and design take place. Uncertainty is not the opposite of knowledge, is what compels knowledge to become reflexive, to examine its limits and assumptions. This is why uncertainty cannot be reduced to risk. Risk can be calculated. When uncertainty is transformed into risk, we assume the future can be planned through better data or predictive system. Yet, deep uncertainty does not simply ask for more information. It asks for different ways of knowing. When confronted with this uncertainty, design must move beyond control, beyond optimization. It becomes less than an instrument of resolution and more a practice for negotiating indeterminacy. Slowness, problematization, engagement with the possible, descripting, and resistance to inevitabilism are ways of practicing uncertainty, questioning how problems are framed, interrupting inherited story of the future, and insisting that things could have been and still could be otherwise. Uncertainty as a method keeps the possible open before it is reduced to probable. We need interrogative practices. Why not design as a way of asking questions, tell us Colmine and Wigley. Design understood in this way does not rush toward shaping answers. It makes assumptions tangible and creates a situation where future can be sensed and explored collectively. With critical capacity and future literacy, uncertainty becomes a capacity to recognize the assumption through which futures are imagined and used, by whom, for what purposes, with what exclusion and what consequences in the present. But uncertainty is not only cognitive, it is embodied, affective, and situated. Haraway's situated knowledge reminds us that knowledge is never produced from nowhere, while Braidotis radicalizes this point via understanding the subject as a multiple, relational, embodied, and in becoming. Embodying and sensing futures engages a kind of anticipation that is not merely analyzed or represented. It is felt, sensed, imagined, performed, and embodied through performances, immersive experiences, and participatory methods. Some futures need to be rehearsed and felt before they can be discussed. Praxis is where anticipation becomes accountable. It is the passage from imagining future to intervening in the condition that makes some future more possible and other less inevitable. As designers, we find particular affinity with a philosophy that constructs, creates, and experiments. Concepts are projectual instruments capable of reshaping the present through experimental situations. Design, nevertheless, is never neutral. It is immersed in the practices, systems, and forms of life, continuously engages, and it is also implicated in their perpetuation. This is the warning for the futuring. Design may open possibility, yet it may also reinforce the very trajectory of the subtract futures. Praxis require critique, how concept becomes situated, how imagination enters matter, bodies, and institutions. From this perspective, speculative pragmatism is not an abstract theoretical position, but a design attitude. Speculation becomes a practical way of making the future operative in the present. It holds together imagination and consequence, potential and action, the virtual and the material. We need practice capable of reorienting life away from extractive models and toward the cultivation of new desires, perhaps even toward the desire of the desire itself. The capacity to reopen the field of what it can still be wanted, imagined, and collectively pursued. Eleonora Barbieri Masini, a pioneering voice in social futures and the ethics of anticipation, suggested futurists must not only think of the possible and probables, but also of the desirables. The desirable is not an ornamental addition to anticipatory work. It is the ethical and political dimension through which anticipation becomes praxis. The question of what is worth sustaining, repairing, inventing, and sharing. With futuring by design, design appears as a practice of inquiry, speculation, and word-making, a way of making possible future tangible and discussable again. Yet praxis also requires care, so caring futures brings this dimension forward. Future making as responsibility toward the relationship, memories, and communities. Praxis connect critique and construction, as well as perception and action. It asks us to confront the futuring trajectories while cultivating practices that make alternative future tangible. Praxis, then, is the disciplined work of making desirability situated and activating collective imagination. I've almost finished. Hope, which for me is the more important. Taken together, these thematic areas from a cartography of anticipatory practice, different ways of encountering the unknown and translating it into the fields of inquiry and action. Hope emerges when this situated desirability becomes durable and capable of orienting action. Hope is an anticipatory virtue that activates powerful motivating energies. Braidotti's sentence removes hope from the vocabulary of consolation. Hope is not reassurance, optimism, or belief that things will necessarily improve. It is an anticipatory force because it acts before guarantees are available. It sustains capacity to shape alternatives within certain conditions. In this sense, hope operates as a politics of action. It mobilizes collective agency and sustains the effort to challenge the condition that might otherwise appear inevitable. Braidotti's affirmative politics frame hope as an ethical orientation situated between the no longer and the not yet, a way of thinking with and against the present, refusing both nostalgia and resignation. Hope is not a naive, future-oriented emotion, but an empowering gesture that keeps open multiple subjectives and political trajectories. Hope becomes operative in the present, even within post-normal conditions marked by uncertainty and systemic crisis. In the broadens, the epistemic ground of design, recognizing plural words, knowledges, and cultural practices in which vision and values can be translated into artifacts, material or immaterial, that support long-term transformation. Hope and critique must remain intertwined. Critique protects hope from illusion, while hope prevents critique from paralysis. But also imagination proves vital, let me say. Imagining is not the opposite of thinking. It is an inherently poetic form of thinking, an intrinsic power of the mind. Imagination gives present to what is absent, mobilizes affects, and allows narratives to become part of how we comprehend and transform the world. The voices gathered here do not need to be reduced to a single grammar of the future. Their different roots, languages, motivation, and practices in becoming are not obstacles to interdisciplinary discussion. They are the very material through which futures becomes plural, situated, and accountable. Interdisciplinarity in this sense is not the art of convergence, but the work of composition, letting different forms of knowledge intertwine and transform one another without being flattened into the same mess. To cultivate hope is to cultivate this practical and poetic imagination, the capacity to discern what moves us, what increases our power to act, and what forms of collective life may still be possible. You may say I'm a dreamer, but at least today, I'm not alone imagining this new practice of hope and attention. Mm-hmm.